So literally a 2-second introduction. I didn't want to skip this part. So hi again, everybody. I'm Sarah Hughes. I'm really happy to be here. Let me just go down the line. So Jane, you want to do a quick hello? And Lisa?
Hey everybody, I'm Lisa Albert. I am with the Georgia Department of Education as an L4GA program specialist, and I mostly work with the Birth to 5 piece of the grant.
Great. And Devin?
Hey everybody, my name is Devin. I am also in Georgia. I work with the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning with the lottery funded pre-K program.
Awesome. And Michael? Michael might not be back. How about Lynn?
I'm muted. Hi, I'm Lynn Kirkendall, and I work with the South Carolina Department of Education's Office of Early Learning and Literacy.
Great. And Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Gonzalez. I'm the VPK Regional Facilitator for the Central Region for the Department of Education Division of Early Learning here in Florida.
Great, thanks. And Carla?
Hi, my name is Carla Blanco. I am from South Region. I'm also a VPK facilitator for DOE.
Great. Jamie?
I'm also a VPK regional facilitator here in Florida, working over on the Tampa Bay side.
Great. And Vonda?
I'm Vonda Pittman. Michael and I both are early childhood coaches with the Mississippi Department of Education. I think he's having sound problems.
That's okay.
Oh, yeah, he just put it in the chat. So yeah, and I'm glad to be here.
Great, great. And Sarah?
Sarah Morrison. I'm with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, Office of Early Learning Consultant.
Great. And did I miss anybody?
I can tell you that Michael is from Mississippi he's an early childhood coach.
Yeah.
And I'm Jane. I couldn't find my unmute button when you called me in, and I'm in Tallahassee, Florida with FCRR.
All right, and I'll quickly point out that Jane is actually a dialogic reading expert, which we'll be talking about a lot. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat, and I'm gonna just kind of ask Jane to, respond to those. That'd be great. We ran out of time quite significantly in the last round, so I'm probably gonna speed things up a bit. So I apologize, everybody, but please use the chat and jump in if you do have questions, because I don't want to miss that opportunity. So all 3 sessions for Module 3 are included in one PowerPoint presentation, as you know, and it begins with a title slide that looks like this. Session 7 includes background information about vocabulary. So the facilitator would greet everybody and tell them that the session will be a 90-minute session and make sure that everybody is very familiar. And I don't know if we got record, Jane, just making sure. Oh, sorry, thanks. Okay, great. And then here are the participant activities for Module 3, Session 7, and we're just going to walk through it. So if you grab your vocabulary Module 3 book, Activity 1, beginning on page 8. Activity 1 is the FAQs about vocabulary, and as a reminder, at the beginning of each module, the teachers kind of do a reflection like, well, what do I already know about vocabulary instruction? So it gives them a chance to kind of take their own notes and learn a little bit about what they do and what they do not know. And then at the end of the session, they get to kind of say, oh, wow, this is something that I was really on target with, and here's something that I learned that I didn't know before. Activity 2 is building a network of words. Activity 3 is a reflection activity. Activity 4 is a plan and implement, which is part of the self-study that they would do. This is the do, watch, read portion. And they would do this prior to attending the next session, which would be session 8. These are the videos that you would want to queue up as a facilitator. It's video 1, building a network of words. So there's only one video for session 7. So this is an example of the first step, which is called debrief in the 5-step process for collaborative learning. You can see the icon in the upper left side of the screen. Each session includes a slide that looks like this. It includes a self-study task that participants were engaged in before attending the session. And so for this Train the Trainer, we had asked you to watch videos for some of the content that we'll review today. So we're hoping that everyone had a chance to preview those videos. So let's take a look at and talk about video 1, which was building a network of words. So open up to activity 4, which is on page 13 of your book. And we'll dive right into a debrief, just like you would do with your PLC. So let's review the 4 reflection questions and then discuss just the first 2 questions. So the questions are, while teachers were watching the video, they were supposed to be taking notes to kind of respond to these 4 questions. The first question is, how does your mind store words? The second is, why is it important to build a network of words prior to teaching vocabulary? And then the third and fourth questions are kind of like, what would they do to pull this into their classroom practice? So let's talk a little bit about what came up for you when you watched the video. Did you have any reflections about the 2 first questions? How does your mind store words, and why is it important to build a network of words to teach vocabulary? And you can just shout it out. So some of the key points that are brought up about this video is that our minds store words in networks, words that are related to each other and related to a larger topic of interest. New words are remembered and retrieved more easily when they're connected. You can visualize a spider's web connecting many different related words and words spinning off of words that are spinning off of words. So it's important to build a network of words prior to teaching vocabulary so that you know which words to teach. I think that this is really a challenge for a lot of teachers, trying to figure out which words do I teach? I know what I want to talk about as a theme, but I'm not sure which words to really focus on. When you teach from a network, you're intentional about teaching vocabulary as opposed to just teaching random words that are not connected to each other. Building and teaching from a network helps children learn new words that connect to words they already know. Networks help children more quickly remember and recall words that are associated within the same topic or content area or area of interest. So let's talk about video 4, which was play-based interactions with teacher guidance. This video, yep.
Before we do go on, you do have some comments in the chat.
Oh, sure.
Talking about building and teaching come from a network of words and helps children learn those new words that connect to those words they already know. And also someone commented, I believe that the network will reflect the culture of the class as well.
That is awesome. Yep. Oh, and you gave a yes, this is a very important, yes, those are great comments. Sorry, I might have flown through that a little too fast. I'll slow down for the next one. So video 4 is play-based interactions with teacher guidance. This video is part of session 9, but we're going to discuss it now because it was part of your pre-reading previewing assignment before coming today. So turn to page 52 in your guide. My pages are starting to stick together now. That's a good sign that you're using it a lot, right? So let's discuss just a couple of these questions. You can either say the answer or type in the chat again, and I will use my wait time much better. So, this video viewing guide, while the teachers are watching the video, they would be responding to questions like, what are some specific evidence of how the teacher prepares centers to facilitate the use of target words? Did anybody make any comments to themselves when they watched the video here?
Anna said she really liked this video.
I just thought this video was so on point, and it really showed what the strategy is all about. The teacher did not control the play, but was part of the play. And she brought in elements into the play centers that would guide the children to be able to review those target words and give her an opportunity to engage in those conversations, interacting with the children, focusing on those target words. So I was just floored by her.
That's excellent. I mean, you're exactly right. That's exactly the point. So she had paint to blend, because blend was a target word at the art center. She had dairy products at the kitchen center. She had cheese as a snack. She had cows at the block center while building a dairy farm, and was blending mud and water to make mud pies outside. So it wasn't just in one area. She was infusing that theme throughout the entire day and also throughout the entire classroom. So that, you know, the more meaty your theme is, and that's why you can kind of see why it's really important to have a meaty and interesting theme, because then you can infuse those materials throughout all of those centers and create opportunities. That's a great observation.
If I may, she milked it.
Very good.
Oh.
You get a point.
We also have some comments in the chat. All her materials she had set up, ready to go, and they lent themselves to bring that conversation to the vocabulary that she was really highlighting and wanting to reinforce. The teacher intentionally planned activities and materials which reinforce those target words. And the teacher asks questions that require the use of the target word to answer. And she makes comments during play that included those target words. And self and parallel talk must involve an observable action. Some of the comments from chat.
Excellent. Sorry, I had to put myself on mute because my garage door was opening and it's very loud. Sorry. That's great. Yes, there were some pieces where the teacher was asking questions like, what do we need to do with water and dirt to make a mud pie? Blend. What do we do? What do we use when we think of that? What word do we use when we think that something tastes really yummy, delicious? You know, so it was, yeah, it's great. And she engaged in conversations with each child. So you could see her, you know, popping around. She kept children engaged, like thinking about, well, what is this teacher's role during this play-based piece? Keeping the children actively engaged, working in small groups, and asking, like brought up in the chat, asking questions to elicit the target word. Teachers prompting children to say the first sound in delicious, so that it was a scaffold to help them kind of come up with that word that they had heard. Having, well, I mean, this is a silly thing to point out, but that she's smiling and having a good time. There's nothing worse than, you know, you're not really engaging in play if you're not smiling and having a good time. The one thing I want to point out is in the reproducible materials section at the back of the participant guide is a template for planning play-based interactions with teacher guidance. It's on page 83 in that module. And I think it can, I think it's a really helpful template to get teachers to really think about, well, okay, I've got my theme, you know, this is the week of whatever it is. Here are some explicit words that I know I want to really try to get the children to start using and engaging with. Well, here's how I can infuse materials and what I can do to help elicit some of this. So that's great. So each session includes a slide that also looks like this, and you're going to notice there's a step 2 up in the corner of the 5-step collaborative process. The facilitator would say, during this session, we'll dive into the content that you read prior to the session. Our goals for session 7 are to understand vocabulary, when it develops, and why it's important to teach. Another goal is to understand how vocabulary is used in different contexts and how language interaction contributes to vocabulary knowledge. And then finally, we'll learn about creating and using a network of words to teach vocabulary. To reach these goals, we'll follow a 5-step process as previously described. we want to be sure, before we get any further, I want to be sure to emphasize that vocabulary is part of oral language development. And I'm sure since you guys already attended the oral language module, you heard the same thing. So we just wanted to be sure to point that out, that vocabulary development is part of oral language development. So what is vocabulary? Vocabulary is knowledge of words and word meanings, including pronunciation. That words make up speech. It's what we say, and text, what we read. It's essential for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The facilitator will say, vocabulary knowledge is a key element of oral language and necessary for communication. Keep in mind that oral language is the focus of Module 4 in this PLC. From birth, a child's brain is open to learning language, so vocabulary begins to develop long before children begin preschool or even reach their first birthday. In the self-study reading, you read about the age and vocabulary growth for a typically developing child. Within a year of birth, a child can name a few things such as familiar things, cat, milk, bottle. At 18 months, a child has an expressive vocabulary of about 50 words. At around age 2, a child's expressive vocabulary is more than 200 words, and he or she can speak in 2-word phrases. During the 3rd year, a child can speak in 3 to 4 word sentences using verbs such as run and pronouns such as I and me. From single words to phrases to full sentences is a lot of brain development. That's the first 3 years. It's a lot happening. So the size of a child's vocabulary, the real point to kind of highlight here is the size of a child's vocabulary is strongly related to how much caring adults talk with children. So the quantity, meaning how much and how often, the quality and the responsiveness of caring adults support children's vocabulary growth. And obviously that's all happening before they get into your pre-kindergarten class. I'm sure you've noticed in your self-study reading that the simple view of reading is kind of across all of the modules. So the facilitator will highlight this again in this module, reminding us all that we use words to think. So the more words a child knows, the better they're able to communicate about experiences and the world. Language represents knowledge. Children must learn the meanings of many words in order to learn how to use language effectively. And vocabulary is important for reading comprehension, which comes much later. Reading comprehension has 2 parts. The simple view of reading states that reading comprehension is the product of decoding, meaning recognizing words in print, and language comprehension, which includes language skills that enable us to understand the words that we read. Now you're thinking to yourselves, read, that's coming later, but emergent literacy skills of print knowledge and phonological awareness, the content in modules 1 and 2 of this PLC, lay the foundation for decoding. And that's an important link to help teachers understand. We aren't teaching reading to preschool children. We're teaching the foundational skills that are necessary. And the other piece of this is that vocabulary knowledge and oral language, which are modules 3 and 4 of this PLC, contribute to language comprehension. That is part of the simple view of reading. It shows how children start building the foundational skills necessary for learning to read long before they come to preschool. Vocabulary knowledge is necessary to understand oral language because we need to know what the words that we hear mean in order to understand the speaker's message. This applies to listening to books read aloud and just engaging in normal conversations and communications. Vocabulary supports decoding once children begin formal reading instruction that occurs in later grades. You might have to say that a lot of times. When older children are reading and come to an unfamiliar word, such as broccoli, they'll try to use words that they have already heard with their letter sound knowledge to make sense of that unfamiliar word. If broccoli is already in their oral language, they've heard it before, they've used it before, they can more easily decode it when they see it in writing and understand what it is. Vocabulary is directly related to reading comprehension because understanding the text that we've read requires knowledge of the meaning of the word that we're reading. Most of session 7 focuses on the importance of understanding and using a network of words to teach vocabulary. And just to be really clear, building this network is part of what teachers do to plan instruction. It's not an activity that teachers are doing with young children. The facilitator would say, knowledge of words is referred to as lexical knowledge. Lexical knowledge is organized in networks of meanings. The way we think about the meanings of words can be visualized as a spider web. A spider web connects the many words that we have in our lexical knowledge. Imagine a word toward the center of a web with connections running out to many other words to create a word web. For example, if bird is at the center of a web, we might have links to other words such as beak, feather, fly, robin, nest, and wing. Many of the words would have connections to one another, like fly and wing, creating a big interconnected web of words. And this is referred to as a network of words. A network of words helps us learn new words that connect to words that we already know. You can notice that there's an icon of people talking on the slide. This indicates that during the PLC, there's time for some collaborative discussion, like a think, pair, share. So the facilitator would say, because we remember and retrieve words more easily when they're connected in a network, we should teach words that relate to each other and to a larger topic of interest. So let's look at the network of words from the self-study reading for session 7 that is on page 7. So let's quickly scan over to page 7. The network of words shows examples of many types of connections. Notice that here is in the middle of the web and is connected to words that are sounds that we hear, such as ring, click, buzz, and howl. And those words are connected to other words that make that sound, like ring is connected to telephone, buzz is connected to alarm, and howl is connected to wind, because the wind howls. So examine the network for other connections. What are some other words or connections that you would make on this list? Just take them and you can type in the chat or you can just shout it out.
Tire, squeak, screech.
Good one. That's great.
It is storming at my house, so thunder and boom are. And Anna says same thing, thunder and boom, clang, strum, and that makes them think of a guitar, strum and guitar, clang of pots and pans, and gurgle for baby.
Oh, that would be, yeah, good one. I mean, you could just see how this could keep going and going and going. But by helping, young children kind of begin with something that they do understand, building that out is really helpful. So I just think that those are fun to do too. So let's turn to activity 2, building a network of words, that is on pages 9 and 10. At the end of session 6, teachers were asked, if you were doing this real PLC, teachers would have been asked to bring with them to this session expository texts about weather and seasons. So they could bring any book that they had that was an expository text about weather or seasons to session 7. And it's also really helpful as a facilitator to have your own library of books in case some of your participants forgot to bring their expository text, because that is likely to happen. In the actual materials, you have suggested book titles that you could actually grab in case you were kind of struggling to find ones that you thought would be great. And of course, we've all done lots of online book shopping for this kind of thing as well. So in the PLC, teachers would be working in pairs to do this activity, and they would complete this step-by-step process. So if you're actually looking at your book, activity 2, building a network of words, you can see the process here. So first, they would use their knowledge that they've learned so far and the self-study reading that they have and the text that they brought with them to determine 2 to 5 concepts that they're hoping children would learn about weather. Then they would create a network of words with weather as a center word. Then they would select 3 to 5 words to teach. And then they would brainstorm an activity to teach the words that they selected. You would remind teachers during the PLC to use the self-study reading and the information to consider, which is actually provided in the center column on the activity sheet as resources to help them complete this task. And again, you would hope that you would be able to do this in pairs so they could really help each other out to do this. Throughout the module's activities, the theme weather is used, and examples provided throughout the module use the theme nutrition. So they will have been able to see how this is done using nutrition as the theme. And then they're like, okay, so I get how they did it with nutrition. Now I have to do the same thing with weather. So after participating, if you think about it, after participating in this PLC, teachers will be able to walk away with several solid activities that they can actively implement for both weather and nutrition as a theme. So let's take a look at activity 2, building a network of words. It tells us that concepts are the building blocks of ideas. So concepts include the topic area and knowledge that you want children to learn. So you can think about this as your curriculum, in a way. What do you want, or your goals? What do you want children to learn in terms of concept? For example, if you're teaching the theme about nutrition, you may have numerous concepts that you want children to walk away with, such as food groups, healthy eating, food preparation. Teachers in your PLC will use their knowledge and the expository text that they have to determine 2 to 5 concepts that they hope children would learn about weather after completing a weather and seasons theme. And then they would record those concepts on activity 2. What concepts about weather would you want children to gain at the end of a theme or unit? Are there any ideas that anyone can come up with? What big ideas? You can call them big ideas, but I know they're called concepts in the materials.
We've got types of weather.
Yep. Great.
Precipitation, clothing for different types of weather. Clouds.
Yeah, you guys are picking up the idea. So, some of these big, like identifying the 4 seasons and the characteristics that go along with those 4 seasons, developing an understanding of the water cycle, identifying the weather conditions that gets to the rain, snow. Well, okay, I'm in Syracuse, New York, so snow, and lots of snow. So, but you can do lots of rain in the South. So tornadoes, hurricanes. We do have tornadoes, by the way, and we just had one recently. So, and then observing the weather to make decisions. Somebody actually mentioned this in the chat. Well, what do I wear today based on the weather? It's raining outside, so what would you wear? Or what would you need to bring with you? Is it safe to play outside today? Let's take a look at the weather. So those are the kind of things that you would think of.
You have an addition of activities in different types of weather. So like your snow, you could do things that we couldn't do down here, and seasonal weather as well.
Yeah, I was thinking that, you could grab a bag of shaved coconut and do something really fun. So that would be great. So
I always used to give them the freezer paper that had that slick side and put them under their feet, and they got to ski.
Oh, yes, that's great. That's great. So next, teachers would use that same template in activity 2 to create a network of words with weather at the center. So this is, you can see on the slide here, this is actually pulled right out of the materials. They would think about the words that are important to know in order to understand the big concepts that they just decided. Like, so if they chose the 4 seasons, well, what are words connected to that I want to put on my network? And so each one that each teacher group comes up with is going to be unique from each other. And there aren't any wrong answers about this. So it's just kind of letting them understand conceptually what this is about. And then you get into more detail as you go along with the PLC. So part of the self-study after this session is for teachers to select 3 to 5 words to actually teach in their classrooms from their network that they created during the session. And so that is the end of session 7, which of course we already know there is so much more in the actual PLC, but we are going to move on so we can get through all of our material here. So session 8 covers how children learn new words, selecting words to teach, and how to use dialogic reading to teach vocabulary. And that's going to be kind of a main piece of what we're going to talk about. There are 6 activities in session 8, which including activity 4, which is a plan and implement self-study activity from the previous section. So starting on page 26, if you just kind of want to follow along to take a glance at the actual activities. Activity 5 is review my network of words. This is where participants will use the network of words developed for activity 2 from session 7. Activity 6 is determining vocabulary words and questions for dialogic reading. Activity 7 is video viewing guide for dialogic reading. Activity 8 is dialogic reading lesson plan. And activity 9 is a reflect, plan, and implement self-study. So the great piece about this is there are 2 videos associated with this session, and it's really wonderful that they decided to include a video of a teacher using expository text to do a dialogic reading lesson. So you have one example of using a narrative text and one example of using an expository text, which I think is really helpful because I think preschool teachers shy away from using expository text. So it's kind of nice that we've got an example here. And we are going to view one of these. So I want to make sure I run through so we have time to view that video because it's actually quite long, but we want to show you how the dialogic reading process works. And I know many of you are very trained in dialogic reading from some of your other work, but we're still going to go through it together. So the facilitator will say, thinking about all the words that there are to teach can be really overwhelming. So which words do you focus on for instruction? The self-study reading describes 3 important considerations when you're selecting words to teach, and this is really important. So the first consideration is to teach new words in different speech categories. I think sometimes preschool teachers forget to think about that. So instead of learning only nouns like chef, market, and utensils, they're also learning verbs such as measure, adjectives such as natural, prepositions such as at, on, and from, and adverbs such as briskly. Nouns are easiest to teach because you can typically show children a picture of it. An actual object, you can label it, they can touch it. Verbs, adjectives, prepositions, and adverbs typically aren't clearly conveyed in only a picture. And just so you can kind of look at page 16, and it provides a table that summarizes the different parts of speech and gives some hints and ideas around that. The second consideration is to teach words that are frequently encountered. So there are 3, categories of frequently encountered words: basic, transportable, and technical words. Basic words are those that do not have multiple meanings and are usually learned through frequent exposure in the context of a child's environment. For example, the word happy, happy is happy, table is table, walk is walk. And then there are transportable words that are words that children may have many opportunities to use across different contexts. So words such as describe, protective, and leader. More time should be devoted to teaching these words because they're considered transportable. They're words that may be encountered often during school activities or while listening to or reading books. Learning these more mature words in preschool can deepen children's knowledge of concepts and build connections to other words and concepts. And then the last one is technical words. And these are important for specific topic related or context related words, but they probably aren't frequently come across, such as the word esophagus or nutrients. they're considered technical words, and they really should be taught with right when they're being encountered or needed. For example, during a science lesson or while reading an expository text to children about that topic. And then, but the third consideration is to teach words that have a set of very closely related words that are often called word families. So word families are formed when base words are made plural. For example, cherry becomes cherries, conjugated into different tenses, bake becomes baked or baking. And when new prefixes or suffixes are added, use becomes unused, usable, user. You know, you're not teaching preschoolers the linguistic terminology. You're just modeling how this is done. You're building children's understanding of the idea of word families and of the meaning of words within word families that are relevant to, you know, what you're talking about in your chosen topic. And keep in mind that when new words are connected to words already in a child's network, they're more likely to be learned and remembered. So you'll teach words from the network of words that you create when planning vocabulary instruction. So the remainder of session 8 is focused on understanding how to implement dialogic reading to teach vocabulary. So the facilitator will say, now we're going to turn our attention to an effective strategy for teaching vocabulary and oral language. It's called dialogic reading. It's an evidence-based strategy to enhance vocabulary and oral language skills through repeated interactive book readings with small groups of children. So there's some important elements here that I don't want to skip over too fast. The first is that it is a repeated interactive book reading experience and that you're doing it with small groups of children. This isn't a whole classroom type of thing. You're also doing this over several days at a time. So let's kind of dive into some of the details, and then we're going to actually watch it in practice in a video. One of the main focus of dialogic reading is to help children learn new words by creating a dialogue about vocabulary that is illustrated in books. In dialogic reading, the same book is shared over several days. Children learn to communicate thoughts and ideas using new words and increasingly complex phrases and sentences. And dialogic reading helps children increase the size of the vocabulary and diversity in their knowledge about words. Thoughtful planning is really important for successful implementation of dialogic reading. A dialogic reading lesson spans 5 days, and it's implemented with small groups. And when we say small groups, we mean, you know, 6 or fewer children. And then, so you kind of have to plan, well, what are the other children in the classroom going to be doing while I'm doing the dialogic reading piece? So they could be involved in centers, working with other adults in the classroom. So the first thing is to select a book. Book selection is really important for dialogic reading in particular. Books can be either narrative or informational, but the illustrations are what are key. The illustrations should be large and engaging and colorful and varied, and they should accurately represent identifiable objects. Like if somebody's never seen a blender, you want to make sure that the illustration in the book, that the blender looks like a blender and it doesn't look like something else. The picture should also represent key words from your network of words. And remember to select pictures that represent multiple parts of speech, such as nouns, verbs, and adjectives. The next thing to consider when book selecting is to select realistic pictures in the book that depict words that are less familiar to children. Remember to avoid unusual words that are used in limited context. Instead, select transportable words, words that are connected across networks and are useful to children in everyday conversations. The words don't have to appear in the text. Remember, they're not reading. They're not reading. It's more important that the illustrations are interesting to talk about and relate to each other, relate to the network of words chosen in your theme. And finally, prepare child-friendly definitions ahead of time for target vocabulary words. Child-friendly definitions should be concrete, use simple language that children are able to understand. And I have to admit, when my kid was 2, this was the hardest. I found it really hard. So I think it's kind of important to say that to teachers. Like, think about, you know, that's hard to do on the spot to come up with a child-friendly definition. I used to struggle with that. and that's okay. Dialogic reading involves 5 sessions that typically span over 5 days. It doesn't necessarily mean that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, if that doesn't work, because it depends on when, you know, your group of little people are there. But you read about how to conduct each of the dialogic reading sessions in the self-study reading, but let me just kind of go through the 5 sessions of dialogic reading. Session 1 is you're reading the book. Session 2, you're teaching new words. Session 3, continuing to teach new words. Session 4, you're asking open-ended questions and expanding children's responses. And in session 5, you can see the progression that it's getting more complex. Session 5 is you're discussing narrative, conceptual pieces, and personal connections. You're helping the children make personal connections. Now I'll recap each session type to prepare us for creating our own dialogic reading plans, which we're not going to do, but this is what you would say to your, to your PLC. So during session 1 of dialogic reading, you're introducing the book by telling children the title, the author, the illustrator. You're also defining what the author and the illustrator do. Next, you read the entire book all the way through with the goal of children understanding the storyline. This is the only time during the 5 sessions that you're reading the whole book aloud. And that can be really hard for some teachers to muster. But it's important. It's really important. As they understand how each session works, they start to see why. The facilitator will say, sessions 2 and 3 of dialogic reading share the same goal and format. The goal of sessions 2 and 3 is for children to learn the vocabulary by labeling items in the illustrations. The labels don't need to appear in the text. The session may last multiple days as children learn the vocabulary to describe objects and actions in the books. Follow the steps on the slides for session 2 and 3 of dialogic reading. You remind the children that they've already read the book and that now you're going to talk about the pictures. As you point to specific identifiable objects and actions in an illustration, you ask who, what, and sometimes where questions. When you ask the questions about the object, encourage children to respond with specific language to label the picture. Remember to plan target words that include nouns, verbs, and adjectives. After the child responds to your initial question, ask a follow-up question about the color, the shape, the purpose, or the function. The function of an object is the purpose for which it's designed or exists and how it's used. So children need to know the vocabulary of the book to be successful during sessions 4 and 5. So sessions 2 and 3 are really critical for building up this vocabulary piece. So you're going to recognize this picture from the self-study reading. This is just, an example of an illustration that's interesting enough to kind of talk about. It'd be really good for building vocabulary through dialogic reading. And I'm going to model some questions, and you can type in the chat or shout some things out loud. And I got to grab my pointer, and I'm going to try to go more quickly because I'm trying to watch our time. Oh, can you see my pointer? Okay, I'm going to just do a couple. So what is this, children? What is this thing?
Picnic basket.
That's right. That's great. And you'll notice that, she selected that because that's a noun. So there's one of her like nouns she can that she was doing. And then, all right, let's see. So what is this man doing? What do you suppose he's doing?
Riding a bike in the chat.
Yeah. Awesome. Very good. And riding is a verb. So there was a good action that the children could talk about. And then, does everybody see this? Boys and girls, do you see this? How would you describe this?
The squirrel is jumping.
Great.
Someone said the squirrel is running.
That's exactly right.
Scampering.
Ooh.
Good word. The squirrel is furry.
Squirrel is furry. That is terrific. So after a child's response, you can follow up with questions such as, what color is it? What shape is it? What do we use this for? You can follow up questions for labeled verbs related to how, when, and where the action is taking place. For example, how did he pedal his bicycle? Or where do you think she's running? Young children and children with limited vocabulary will be more familiar with questions about shapes and colors. So it is important to kind of allow those opportunities for young children to be able to talk about the things that they already do know, while you're also introducing new vocabulary along the way. As they become more familiar, then you can kind of ratchet up those questions. The facilitator will say, during session 4 of the dialogic reading session process, you would continue to ask labeling questions while adding open-ended questions. Open-ended questions encourage many different responses and provide children opportunities to practice language skills. Open-ended questions can't be answered with a single word, yes or no, so you kind of have to plan these ahead of time. After a child answers an open-ended question, you should also respond using repetitions. These are our tricks of the trade. Use repetitions, expansions, or multi-word statements. Remember that a repetition is simply repeating a child's answer. An expansion is providing a few additional words based on the child's response. Expansions assist children in developing language that is more sophisticated by connecting what they say to what the adult added. Multi-word statements that include new vocabulary and descriptive words is also a helpful tool. And we actually have some ideas in the participant guide beginning on page 23, at the bottom of page 23, and it goes on to the top of the page 24. So you can see some examples of open-ended question and expand child responses. By session 5 of the dialogic reading, children should have a firm understanding of the vocabulary that is part of the book and in the illustrations. So by session 5, you can ask questions that relate to the story plot, for example. You know, what happened first? What happened at the end? Ask questions that are related to knowledge of the concept depicted in the book. The family had apples that looked delicious. Where do you think the family got those apples? Where did apples come from? And then ask questions related to children's personal experiences. Have you been on a picnic? Can you describe it? And then this, you'll recognize this figure also from your self-study reading. It's a summary of the sessions for dialogic reading. The graphic on this is on page 25, by the way. It illustrates the idea of layering more knowledge and varying the types of questions asked throughout the 5 sessions of dialogic reading. You can notice how each arrow begins in a new session and continues throughout the rest of the sessions. Each new type of prompt gets added to the previously introduced prompts, and the new prompts are prioritized, but the other prompts remain. So you're building, you're not getting rid of any of the prompts. For sessions 2 and 3, questions are particularly helpful in providing differentiated instruction. Children who had difficulty with some of the target words earlier can be asked those labeling questions again, and this will help children better understand the meanings of words before being asked to use them in open-ended responses. For session 4, continue to ask questions from session 2 and 3, while adding open-ended questions and expanding on children's responses. For session 5, continue asking questions from the sessions 2 through 4, while adding questions that allow children to discuss their personal experiences and recall the story plot. Okay, I know that was a lot. So now we're going to actually see it in action by a teacher. Okay, so I'm going to click us over, but if you want to grab your, if you want to kind of follow along with the video viewing guide that's on page 30, activity 7, this is dialogic reading using a narrative text. So, you know, as you're viewing this, this is a 14-minute long video. I might have to cut us a little bit short, but I'm going to roll us through anyway. Just make some notes to yourself and some observations. All right, so we're ready to roll, and I hope I remember to do the sound. You'll have to tell me, Jane, if I didn't.
Hear it.
We're going to read this book, and this is called D.W. the Picky Eater by Mark Brown. We're going to read about D.W. D.W. and her brother Arthur were helping Mother unpack DW. I'm not going to eat this. You've never even tried it, said Mother. It's looking at me, said DW. What is this person's job? Serving food. Do you know what we call that person?
Waiter.
A waiter. Very good. This person is called a waiter. Since this is a man who serves food, we call him a waiter. A waitress is a woman who serves food. What a good little eater, said the waiter when he cleared DW's dishes. It was delicious, said DW. How do you make that? Very simple, really, said the waiter. Just take some pie pastry and fill it with lots and lots of spinach. Remember when we read this book earlier today?
Yeah.
Yeah? Now I'm going to ask you some questions about it, okay? What is this called right here?
Grocery bag.
A grocery bag. Everyone say grocery bag.
Grocery bag.
What do we use a grocery bag for?
Groceries.
Carrying groceries. Where do we carry the groceries? To our houses. Very good job. What is this?
Mat. Big mat.
What kind of a mat? What kind of mat is this right here? What do we use? What do we have for this? To not spill things, but what is it called? Placemat. Placemat. Can everybody say placemat?
Placemat.
What shape is this placemat?
Rectangle.
A rectangle. Very good. The placemat is a rectangle. What is this? It's not the grocery bag, the big thing. It's the refrigerator. Very good. What do we use a refrigerator for?
To keep food cold.
To keep food cold. A refrigerator helps keep the food cold. Very good job. What is this?
Pineapple.
A pineapple. What is a pineapple?
A fruit.
A fruit. A pineapple is a fruit. Everyone say pineapple.
Pineapple.
Excellent job. Where is the family eating?
In the table.
What kind of room is this that the family is eating in? They're eating at the table, but what kind of room are they eating in?
Dining room.
A dining room. Very good. What are they reading?
Menu.
Menu. They read the menu at the restaurant. What is a menu used for?
Telling you what food you want.
What food you want to order. Very good. It tells us what the restaurant has that we can order. What is the waiter giving DW?
A boost.
What kind of a seat?
A piece.
A booster seat. Can you say booster seat?
Booster seat.
Very good. What do we use a booster seat for?
Little kid.
Little kids, what do they do? What does it help the little kids do? Sit up.
And not run away.
Not run away, but what else? Sit up so they can see, which means they sit up higher. They sit up higher so they can see over the table. CDW can't see over the table, so she needs to have a booster seat to help her sit over the table. Do you remember this book that we read?
Yeah.
It's called DW the Picky Eater, and it's by Mark Brown. What does Mark Brown do?
So
What is he called? He doesn't serve the food. What is he called?
An author.
An author. Very good. And what does an author do?
Offer books to someone.
He doesn't offer the books. He writes the books, the story in the books. He writes the books. Very good job. All right, I'm going to ask you some questions. In this picture, what is the father doing? The father is driving. What is he doing in this picture? Well, he's not eating. What is he doing in this picture?
Serving.
He's serving. Who is he serving in this picture?
The mom.
The mom. Very good. When we give someone food, we say that is serving. Everyone say serving.
Serving.
Good. The father is serving shrimp. What is the father serving?
Shrimp.
Shrimp. What is DW doing with her shrimp? DW is right here. What is DW doing? is she actually doing with the shrimp?
Feeding it to the dog.
Feeding it to the dog. The father is serving shrimp, and DW is feeding her shrimp to the dog.
And Arthur is watching.
And Arthur is watching. Just being sneaky. What does DW not like on her salad? Spinach. What color is the spinach?
Green.
What is this? What is this area called?
A garden.
A garden. What kind of garden? What's growing in this garden?
Flowers.
What else besides flowers do we see?
Plants.
Plants. What kind of plants? What's growing on the plants?
Carrots.
Carrots. And what are carrots?
Vegetables.
Vegetables. Very
I love
good.
eating
This is a
lettuce.
vegetable garden. The garden grows vegetables like carrots, peas, and lettuce. Everyone say garden.
Garden.
Right. Let's look at the menu. What are these?
Pancake.
Pancakes. Pancakes are made of wheat, which is in the grain food group. What is this on the table?
Food.
What is the food on top of?
Table.
What's covering the table? What's covering? Tablecloth. Very good. What do we use a tablecloth for?
So you don't spill.
So we don't spill things, so it keeps it what? Clean. And what else do we use a tablecloth for?
So it doesn't get dirty.
Okay, so it doesn't get dirty. And what else? What does it look like on the table?
So we can keep food on the table so it won't fall out.
Good. And does it look pretty on the table? Does it?
Yeah.
Yes, it looks pretty on the table. Tablecloths keep the table clean. What is this person's job?
Serving.
What is his? What do we call him? He
Waiter.
does serve. What do we call him?
Waiter.
Waiter. This is a waiter because it is a man who serves food. Remember, we call a woman who serves food at a restaurant a
Waitress.
waitress. I see Arthur putting away groceries. Tell me what you see. What is that?
That's too fast.
What is that?
Grocery bag.
The grocery bag. What else do you see in this picture? Tell me, use your words. Use words.
Refrigerator.
The refrigerator. And what's a refrigerator for?
To be brutal.
To keep food cold. What else do you see on this page? Amina, what do you see? What is that? The mom. Very good. What is the mom doing?
Putting the food away.
Putting the food away. Very good. And a refrigerator is to keep food cold and fresh. Let's look at this page, friends. Tell me what's going on in this page.
The baby says, taking care, watching DW.
Watching DW. How is she watching DW? She's reading. She's reading a book, right? What is DW doing?
She's eating carrots.
Think she's eating carrots.
Yeah.
What else does it look like she could be eating? Cheetos. What else is going on in this picture? Tell me what else is happening. You don't know what else? What else is happening?
She was
Playing with her red car. The plant is growing in the pot.
There's water.
Water in the plant, good. What else? The straw is in the cup. Look at this one. The light is on
Yeah, and it's glowing so that
and glowing so they can see the words.
she's wearing glasses too.
She has on red glasses, just like you.
And she in DW has autism.
Pajamas, pink pajamas.
I have pink pajamas, but it's a nightgown.
Oh. What else are they doing? Sitting on the green couch. What do you see on this page? Eating mats. What do we call those? They do eat on them. What's the name?
Dining.
They are dining. They're eating.
Mats.
What kind of mat? Do you remember? They're called placemats. Can you say placemat? Placemat. DW looks mad. Why?
That's the spinach.
Because the spinach. Why doesn't she like her salad?
Because the spinach.
Because there is spinach in the salad. And DW doesn't like spinach. So DW pounded her fist on the table. Then what happened? Not the booth. What happened after she pounded her fist on the table?
Her dad got mad.
Yes, they got mad. And her mom, how do her mom and dad feel? DW's mom and dad?
Mad.
Mad? All right, let's look at the page. No, said DW, and she pounded her fist onto the salad dish. I'm so embarrassed, said Mother. No more restaurants for you, scolded Father. Mom feels...
sad.
Not sad. What does she feels embarrassed. Very good. Why? So Mom feels embarrassed because DW had a tantrum in the restaurant. Have you ever had a tantrum in the restaurant?
What does that even mean?
When you throw a fit. Have you ever thrown a fit in a restaurant? That's good. Tell me why the waiter said that DW was a good eater.
Does it eat all of it?
She ate all of what?
Her
food. And what did Mom want to know from the waiter? What did she ask the waiter?
How do we make the pig pot pie?
How did we make the pot pie? What do we call it when you use something to make that?
Spinach.
Not the spinach.
Oh,
The spinach goes in it.
recipe.
A recipe. And what did this recipe have in it?
Vegetables.
Vegetables. What kind of vegetables?
Spinach.
Very good. Have you ever used a recipe before?
Yes.
Yes. What have you made?
I made macaroni and cheese.
Ooh, delicious. Amina, have you helped Mommy and Daddy use a recipe?
Yes.
What have you helped make?
I was hungry and Mama made me pancakes.
Did you help?
Yeah.
Good. Alex, have you helped make food with a recipe?
We made pancakes.
You made pancakes too?
Well, I just like crack an egg so I don't live.
Very good, because the recipe told you to crack eggs.
Huh?
Excellent. Juniper, have you ever helped?
Well, I think last time we were making these little sandwiches, and I helped in my mom and my dad.
Very good. And what does the recipe tell us? It tells us to follow what?
Instructions.
The directions and what we need and how to cook.
So I think one of my favorite things is listening to 4-year-olds say the word sandwich or sandwiches. It's like my favorite thing. So did everybody have a chance to kind of jot down some thoughts or notes on their activity page? And I'm just going to kind of ask anyone to volunteer if they had any reflections.
We've had quite the robust conversation in the chat going.
Oh, excellent. Do you want to do some reviews?
Yes, let me get back because we've been going for a while. Let's see. The teacher acknowledges the children's verbal contributions by repeating words and phrases. We did have some discussion about, was there a way to condense from 5 sessions to fewer? And I discourage that because the children, many times day 2 and day 3, you're introducing different vocabulary words. So you might pick 10 or 12 words for a book, but you wouldn't teach them all the same day. You would break it up over days 2 and 3. You might introduce one in day 1. The only thing that I did suggest, and I hope it's okay, is that sometimes, because small group time is just such a hard thing sometimes to work into the day, and it really scares teachers when they hear 4 or 5 sessions for dialogic reading. Well, what am I, I've got to have my math and phonological awareness and, all of these other components in small group. And if you can only work in one small group per day, one thing that you can do is read the book day 1 or session 1 in whole group.
Oh, very good.
And then you do sessions 2, 3, 4, and 5 as your small group. So that kind of cuts one. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is they don't have to be consecutive days. If you're like me, the children's memory is much better than mine. So they remember from day to day and can still talk about. You might have to remind them of some vocabulary, but that's okay. And so you might take 2 weeks on the same book to complete your 4 or 5 sessions on that one dialogic reading book that you're using. And then you've got the other days for your math and print awareness and those kinds of things. So don't think that once you start a book, you have to do it every single day for 5 days or 4 days. Let's see, I think there were some more. There's a lot of comments about the vocabulary being really low and children come lacking it, so they can see the real importance of this. Someone said fantastic modeling of a read aloud. She does do a great job on the dialogic reading.
And you could know, the one thing I wanted to point out is her use of sticky notes. You could see that all of that preparation she had done ahead of time.
Exactly.
But you could see her like reminding herself, wait, what was I?
Yep. So and someone commented on that and said, she was very well prepared. And she asked, all different kinds of questions, the labeling, the follow-up, and all of that. And one of my comments was, did you notice the sticky notes? That she was very prepared beforehand. There was a question about the participants seeing the videos. And so I told them they were on the website and that they would be viewing them in the trainings that they did.
The links are embedded right in the materials that everything's online.
Perfect. And then the last comment after the preparation was that the questions are asked throughout the book, not wait till the end of the book and then discuss it. She's using those illustrations to guide the conversation or the dialogue about the book throughout. And you might skip pages. She didn't do every single page in each session.
That's great. I feel like you hit all the points, because remember, you went with your PLC materials. You also have we have 5 minutes. Okay. We in the PLC materials, you as the facilitator have key points to emphasize about the video. Our group happened to hit all of our key points that you would emphasize. So that, it's great. For example, the teacher was asking labeling questions. When a child didn't know the label for placemat, they called it a mat. The teacher prompted by asking what kind of mat, so you could kind of see how that went. She asked questions that were about shapes and colors. And then what do you use things for? What do we use a refrigerator for? What's a menu used for? And then she cycled back and kind of got to words in another way. That's something that I noticed also on the second time that I'm viewing this video more carefully. And then also noticing another kind of teacher thing that she I thought did really skillfully is when the children had this tendency to want to point at things, she kind of had to have them say, use your words, and allowed them to point at it, but also, the whole point is to get them to be talking and bringing out that oral language. He specifically tried to get reluctant children to act and ask them specific questions to try to get them a little bit more engaged. And just one, last key point that's in the materials is that the plot of the story influenced the kind of questions that she had on her sticky notes to have the children respond to. About, like I just thought it was cute, about the tantrum that, she kind of was like, she didn't know that the little boy was going to say, what is that anyway? What is a tantrum? What are you talking about, teacher? So she took a moment to kind of talk about that. All right, great. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes, so I'm going to continue on. That's session 8. Session 9 is about teaching vocabulary, more ways to teach vocabulary, considerations for English language students and students with disability, and plus all of the additional resources. These are the activities, which I'm going to kind of fly through so you get the gist of how this works. There are 2 videos, play-based interactions with teacher guidance, where you actually see some of the things that we had talked about earlier. We see this in action, and then explicit instruction for specific words. One of the evidence-based instructional strategies focused on in this session is explicit instruction for specific words. So the facilitator would talk about that it's possible to explicitly teach it's not possible to teach every vocabulary word that children need to learn, but using following a systematic plan can really help, using a 3-step instructional routine when explicitly teaching a vocabulary word. So first, you're creating a simple child-friendly definition that uses words that are already familiar. Second, you're providing opportunities for children to say the target word by asking them to repeat the word after you say it. What is a word that means really big? And then third, engaging children in active responses by providing opportunities to complete an activity related to the word and its meaning, where they actively are engaged verbally and non-verbally. So let's quickly review this instructional routine. Creating a simple child-friendly definition. Enormous means big. Provide opportunities for children to say the word. What's a word that means really big? And then engaging children in an active response. So in this example, when I show you a picture, put your thumb up if you think it's enormous, put your thumb down if you don't think it's enormous. So this is just an activity to kind of decide whether or not, or which bullet point is a child-friendly definition and which is a more complicated one. So for consume, which one would you guess? First bullet or second bullet?
Coming in on the chat, second.
That's right. And then predict, first bullet or second bullet? That's right. And can you see, kind of the difference is that the first bullet has more words in it, but they're simpler words that children are more likely to understand. All right, everybody, we're going back into the main room. We had a great group, yay. So we'll see you, and I'll see you in the big room.